Okay, today's lecture is going to be about the materials list and the vocabulary simultaneously in Lesson 1, which is over on the left side. Now, the way that this workbook is laid out is you have 4 sections with 14 lessons, and every lesson has vocabulary. Today's vocabulary is basically the materials list. So except for a couple items here, that's mainly what we'll be covering today. Now all of these items in the vocabulary can be found on the back of the book, and this is actually another book that I've got here that's actually, if I was to open this one up, which has the all of the vocabulary, and then it has quizzes which cover about 3 lessons. So as I'm talking about the vocabulary here, you can use your book and look up the definitions of these in the back of the book. So these are in alphabetical order, but I won't be able to actually describe them in alphabetical order. I want to start out with some of the basic things that you'll be using in here, actually with the first lesson. And so as we go down the list, the first thing I want to talk about in here is the HB graphite scale. So what that is it's a designation of the graphite pencils that you have in your kit. So what I'm going to do is move this over to the side, and I'm going to lay this little chart in here. Set this down here. The pencils, actually graphite is a form of carbon that is a natural material found in the earth. And although some people describe pencils or as lead pencils, there's really no lead in them. This is a typical pencil that you might be familiar with. This is a Dixon number 2, sometimes called a office pencil. You can see this also has an HB designation to it. This pencil has a built-in eraser. Generally, you can, of course, draw with just about anything, but we don't usually draw with this type of pencil because they're not readily available in different hardness. Now pencils come in different hardness, which is what the HB scale is, which most of the time will range from 9H as you count down all the way to H, and then B where you count all the way up to 9B. The B stands for black, the H stands for hard. The pencils actually are composed of a ball clay and graphite in different combinations. So you'll have more graphite in the softer pencils as opposed to ball clay, and more clay as opposed to graphite when you get into the harder pencils. The pencils generally that you're asked to buy aren't the whole scale. The whole scale can be relatively expensive. What you're looking for is just, you'll have these 5 pencils. And they come in different colors, you know, depending on the brand. These are Prismacolor, and this is a different brand here. But they're all of them are pretty much the same. The ones, you'll notice these come without a eraser. Now, there's 2 ways in talking about these pencils that you use those. One of those is the pressure, and the other one is the type of pencil that you want to pick for a line. Now, if I'm to take these, and I'm just going to line them up and set them down here and draw all of them at once. Now, I had these lined up exactly the same way as they are here on the paper. And what you have is, this is the 4B, the 2B, HB, 2H, and 4H. Now you notice the difference in the blackness or the darkness of the pencil, and also in the width of the line. And that's the difference. When all of the pencils lined up have the same pressure applied to them, they're going to look different. The center of the scale here has a combination pencil called the HB, which you have, and then an F, which is actually called fine. But fine and hard, which are two pencils, are very similar. But this one actually tends to be slightly darker than the H pencil. And so what you have is the HB here is the middle scale pencil, which would correspond to something that you get in an average pencil like this. So in using these pencils, what I'm going to do is show you how you can use each pencil with a different pressure. Let's see, this is a 4H. I'll start at this end here. Now I'm drawing on a piece of rag paper, which is another one of your terms you have in the vocabulary for this time. Rag paper is made up of 100% cotton fiber, which this paper is, and it also, and usually those kinds of papers are more expensive, and those kinds of papers have more of a paper tooth, is what they call it. Tooth is actually what the lead grabs onto, and as you go to a softer pencil, and I'm just going to go to this end now, which is this 4B, you'll notice that the more expensive papers, the rag, 100% rag papers, have what's known as mountains and valleys, and that's what's called the paper tooth. Some of the paper tooth on mechanically made papers, which are less expensive than these, which are handmade papers and mold-made papers, actually have a more random tooth to them. And you see the tooth is actually this, you'll see these darks and lights and highs and lows in this range. Now this range is made only from me changing the pressure of the pencil as I draw. And you notice that if the pressure is not the same, you end up getting little darker lines in there. And what I'm doing is just illustrating the differences from the pressure of each one, and I'll talk about why different ones can be used for different things. You'll notice also, I'm going to get this book out of the way, as I'm drawing here, I got my hand resting on the paper, and I'm actually using the pencil almost the same way you would if you were to write your name, or writing down some words, or writing a paper. You don't do too much of that anymore without using a computer. But that's the more of a traditional way to hold the pencil. Some people hold it a little differently, but in any case, what you're doing is you have to have your hand on the paper in order to use your fingers like this to adjust the pressure. You see, you might have seen or heard about people holding a pencil in a different way, which I'm going to do in a minute here. Holding a pencil like this is the way a painter would hold a brush. Now, this way is very good for holding a pencil if you're going to be drawing on a big scale, or drawing larger shapes, or drawing fluid marks. And you'd be actually holding the pencil like this, and you might draw something like this. You can also adjust the pressure this way, like I did, making the lines lighter and darker. But it's a little difficult to draw this way. One of the things about holding it up here is that you're not resting your arm on the paper. If I want to draw and hold my pencil like this, it's very difficult for me to draw without holding and hold the pencil off the paper. And so what will happen is, you see right here, is look at my hand. You see that? That's from this graphite. So, and you can see it right here. So I did that on purpose to show you that, well, what happens is, depending on, there's a little strategy to drawing sometimes as to how you're covering the paper with your graphite. And so some people wear gloves, or you can use a scrap piece of paper like this, and you can actually lay it over the area so that when you're drawing over next to something that you're drawing on, you don't get your hand on this stuff and you start to smear it, because that's not a desired outcome that you want. Okay, you notice that the harder the pencil, the one with the more clay, they tend to have a silvery appearance, and they don't pick up the tooth of the paper as well. So there is a different characteristic to the different hardness of pencils. Also, one other thing that the pencils will tend to do is that the softer pencils wear down faster. So by that I mean, let's say I'm going to draw a picture of a pencil tip here. And you see how I'm dragging all kinds of tracks of smudges. When you're working on your projects, you have to be very careful not to do smudges like that. And I would too if I didn't want to do it on purpose. Okay, so this is the lead here in this tip. Now as you draw with these, what happens to the point is it will wear on an angle about like this. So that if I was to color this in, this would be about what you have left on the lead when you have a dull pencil. It's about like that. Now, part of the reason for that is because nobody draws straight up and down, and nobody really, you know, and so most of the time you're drawing on some kind of a 45-degree angle. Now what you can do is turn the pencil and use this edge over here as a point. Some people do that, but the best thing to do is to resharpen your pencils so that you always have a sharpened point, because the texture and the line will change dramatically as the point gets duller. Now this number 4B here, which is this one, has already been used to draw this. So this is going to have a fairly, I don't know if you can see that, but this line is actually fatter already than this one, because it's pretty much wore down on the side. Now if I was to turn it like this, I can actually make a lot different line, you see, like that, because I actually turned the pencil. So there's one way to extend that amount of drawing without running up to the pencil sharpener all the time. Although you can also use a handheld sharpener like this to continually keep your pencil sharp. It has little razor blades in it. Also, if you want, you can use a single edge blade and actually sit there and clean those off like that, although we do have mechanical sharpeners in the room as well. You can use an electric sharpener too. Now this is the 4B pencil, and when using these pencils you can combine the marks. And so I'm going to do the soft one over the hard one here. Now one of the things about paper tooth is that it can be destroyed, or it can be smashed down, and that's what happens when you use the hard pencils. And so that destroys the surface of the paper, and the surface of the paper is a lot of what the soft pencil relies on. So if you'll notice how this area looks here, and you'll notice over here, here's the normal way it would look, and then right in this area here, it's not hardly taking any graphite at all from this pencil, because the harder pencils effectively tend to seal up the paper and eliminate the tooth. Now if you go to the opposite side and take the 4H and draw on top of the 4B, you actually are adding to what's already on the paper, because the paper tooth is still there. So drawing hard on soft is more effective than drawing soft on hard. And what you notice here is I can actually add to the marks by drawing this, and in this one it doesn't really add anything. It's very sporadic and hard to control. Okay? All right, I think what we'll do is we're going to end this lesson, and then I'm going to start the next one with the rest of the vocabulary.